I forgot what I was going to say about tea. I got nothing.
And that will be the opening line. Fits perfectly.
I know.
So,
if you do you ever listen to Reconcilable Differences?
Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah, what we just did was the pre-flight, and now we've started the show.
It's funny. There are so many little things that end up being pulled from shows that we listen to. Like, if you really take the time to go through how we do a show, you can find bits and pieces of many different ones that are very well known.
Yeah, it's we are totally influenced by what we consume.
So I figured it would be nice to have just really a blank check of a conversation, so to speak. You know, one of those things where no structure to it. Let's just round out the year with something that's fun. And, part of it is I kind of want to think through what the show looks like in another year. And part of it is I just didn't want to dive into anything overly complex right after going on vacation. And I know we had the sandwich episode air while I was out of town, but following that episode felt like it would be a good way to bridge getting back into routine topics with something that was just a little more lighthearted.
Yeah.
So that said, I really don't have any specific piece or topic or anything other than the entire past year is open, and what we kind of want to do over the next year is open. One thing I did want to do, though, because I still think that there's one episode that really is going to stand the test of time so far that we've done, just call it out and reference anyone who might be stumbling across the show now. Go back and at least listen to one specific episode. And I'm certain you know which episode I'm talking about.
It's episode 50. Is it 56 or 50?
So I know we're thinking of the same thing.
Yeah.
And part of what's funny is that I called you out because I had to scroll through my list real quick to see exactly what number it was. But it was episode 50, where we really were talking about just being a decent human being.
It was the one where we cleaned up the title because I love the title.
Yeah.
If you know what it's, the ship is sinking and they're fucking around with deck chairs.
Yeah, I figured the title should maybe be a little more toned down, even though the content was not. And it's one of those things that just from a standpoint of someone stumbling across the show, I could see where that might be jarring.
Yeah, it's yeah. I thought that was a good idea. They're playing around with deck chairs. They're mucking about. They're faffing about. I'm using British words because they're a bunch of wankers. I haven't watched any British shows. I don't know why.
Well, it's because we were talking about tea before we started the show.
That's right, and I'm drinking tea.
But aside from that, like over the past year, I feel best about the episodes where we focused on non-technical topics, talking about behavior and more or less current events and things that influence decision-making and opinion and thought processes in general. And I feel like that we do a better job of discussing those things than we do a lot of the other stuff. Because with a lot of the other stuff, we may possess the ability to interpret what we read, but I wouldn't say we're overly great at being able to reinterpret it for an audience.
Yeah, I think it's at this point, it's like neither of us are qualified. I think we've it's in our the subname. Is it a subname? You have a title. Okay, it's a subtitle of the show.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at you'd sent them a quick piece of info. I know that just to preface, we may or may not have some technical issues with this show. I'm not hearing some of the things that are apparently coming across our connection. So I think we'll be okay in the final recording, but I do want to go ahead and just mention there may be some issues with this particular episode.
Yeah, if I have any question, I may be asking you questions about what you just said or ask you to repeat it. So
yeah, no problem at all. It just want to mention that it may sound kind of strange, and it's because we're dealing with some seemingly connection-related issues that are not affecting local recording, and so it's going to sound a little bit strange when it's all put together.
Yeah.
But really, aside from kind of where we've shined over the past year, I thought it might be interesting to hone in a bit more on where we think the next year is going. I certainly want to tackle some of the conversations we've alluded to relating to like the amount of influence parents actually have over the development of their children and versus the amount of influence peers have, etc. And those types of behavioral topics, but I don't necessarily want to explore it from a purely psychological viewpoint either. I would rather explore it from a how does this impact us day to day type of view. And so I thought it might be interesting to also ask you just what are some of the things you would like to explore topically?
I like where we've gone with this. I think we could probably get into a few more, maybe deeper into a particular niche, one that we either like interests us, like as far as a hobby, or tangentially vocational. So I'm kind of interested in going that direction.
I do think we've been far more quote-unquote current event focused than I expected us to be.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like a natural place to put a stake in the ground and say that's kind of the focal point week to week of what drives the thought for conversation, even if it's not specifically a current event. For example, one of the things that we talked about was the way you define and manage those bonds with family, and it was born out of a personal specific topic, but it was something that seemed to be quite well received overall, even if just among us trying to talk through it specifically. I guess the question that I have, the kind of meandering way I'm getting to it is, should we really hone in on a specific subset of topics, or should we kind of keep that flexibility of what the previous week influences from a thought perspective type of feel to things? Basically, should we create a bit more structure of a chain of stories that kind of flow together, or is that too structured for the way we tend to do our best work?
I don't know. I want to say both, but it's not both,
Yeah, I know. I keep going back and forth between the two, and it's part of why I wanted to make it a bit of a topic, because I don't have a good answer for it. Like, part of me wants to have a cohesive narrative, but part of me also really likes the flexibility of adjusting to something that is of utmost interest for that, preceding few days.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, like, I was thinking about how, like, this is the first show of the new year. So Happy New Year to everybody. And we didn't really have reflections on 2021, and that's okay, because you know what, it's our show and we can do it whenever we want. But there were just a lot, even though 2020 was a shit show of a year, there were a hell of a lot of what the fuck moments in 2021. Like, it started in the first fucking week. Like it got real on the 6th. Like, part of it is like, part of it feels a little bit like so the way January 6th ended was softened because everybody kind of went home when it got dark. But we had a fucking coup in this country. It was unsuccessful, but it mattered. Like, it mattered in a big way. Like, we're not ever going to be the same. And we've had a lot of other moments, maybe not quite as intense, but we had a lot of what the fuck moments from people doing various things, and we've talked about it a lot. And I feel like it's been very cathartic for me to be able to get here, get behind the microphone, and express my thoughts on it, and put it out there, and hear you say some things, and, one, reaffirm certain things that I'm already thinking, challenge me on certain things that I'm already thinking. And I don't think that we should deviate from that, but it's hard when every show is that way. And so the sandwich episode from last episode was a lot of fun.
And it's part of what kind of provoked the thought. I kind of feel like we need a run of 3 to 4 weeks of whatever specific thing we need to focus on, and then have a week or two break. And that break being just a fun, lighthearted conversation that is completely off topic and tangential and doesn't matter to the rest of the show. But I don't know that events in general allow for structuring that well based on just history.
I think if an event happens, we don't have to be reactive about it. We can say, hey, where does this fit in? Does it fit in? No, it doesn't fit in. Maybe it's an after show topic where we can do whatever we want there, and we stick to a certain set of topics that we have, in our roadmap. And maybe we say, hey, does this fit in our roadmap in any way? And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So I might be leaning towards that, I think.
Yeah, I feel like the more we talk about it, the more the kicker is just developing a roadmap for what topics we want to hit. Have a little bit further reaching vision for where the show is going and where we're getting, even if there's no timeline.
Yeah, and we may jump way back to that first set of topics that we created and made a list for way, back in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me says that a lot of those have aged well enough, I guess, that we've covered the general ideas. I don't know. I'm torn because there's so much that seems to happen so quickly anymore. Like the biggest thing I think for me is if I were to describe the show to someone, I would like to be able to describe it with a cohesive message. Just a fairly simple 1 or 2 liner that would set expectations well. And I think that's easy enough to do if we do a slightly better job of mapping out 2 or 3 episodes at a time.
Yeah, we haven't. Maybe what it is that we haven't found what this show is about.
Well, I think that's part of it because both of us have so many different interests that kind of clash, and not in a negative way, but as far as bring our thought processes and topics of conversation together repetitively, that it's real easy for us to start talking about something and follow every shred of the conversation, even if it seems to be out of left field. And it's because of the varied interests that are shared that it's fairly. What's the way I'm trying to think of it? It's very cohesive internally, but when you're listening to it as a recorded show, it doesn't feel as cohesive.
Yeah, V1 was like all over the place.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've definitely done a much better job of focusing in on topics. I think the missing piece is that there's not something that to an outside audience ties a lot of it together. You know, for us, there's plenty that ties it all together. But that's just the nature of knowing each other well. I think the missing piece is if I go and listen to a show in January and listen to a show in July, am I going to think it's the same show? And I think that's the part that we've got to do a little bit better job of. What does it mean to listen to the show? Is it just the same format week to week? Is it some cohesive element that we touch on each week? Is it literally just the same voices each week? You know, whatever it is, leaning into it a little bit more than we have so far.
Yeah, it's got to be more than, hey, I recognize those voices.
And I really think as much as it seems kind of trite and silly, the whole trying to do better aspect seems to be the thing that I always come back to. You know, it doesn't matter if you're trying to do better in understanding something or trying to do better in how you interact with the world or trying to do better for who you are or how you think about things. All of those are tied together well with the thought of, I'm going to do better tomorrow than I did today. Did I lose you, or do we just not have a next statement?
No, okay. I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm still here.
Just making sure, since we've had that problem in the past. But I really do. I feel like that's the thing that ties it together. It's just trying to figure out what that means as a listener of the podcast.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, my goal is pretty simple. It's someone who knows me, their life is better for having known me or interacted with me or known of me. Each day, that's my goal.
Right.
To make someone else's life better for having known who I am. Even if it's just a passing interaction. It feels like that's a pretty solid foundation to start from.
I agree.
So how do we, here's the $1 million question. How do we make that a unifying theme conversationally?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know. Like, there was
way too much of a just grumpy old man at this point to know how to make that fit.
You know, there was a podcast I listened to briefly, and the reason it was briefly is because I only put out 2 episodes, but it was I was pretty interested in this podcast. Actually, mostly for the, well, I'll stand back. It's like, usually if somebody that I know has put something out into the world, I'll buy it or, participate in it. So, like, there's a few people that I worked with in different Apple stores, and they've published some books, and I've bought those books. I've even had a few customers that had published books, and I bought their books as well. And there was a woman that I worked with. She put out a book, and I bought her book. I have read parts of it. But she also, she at some point, I think it was prior to the pandemic, became an OnlyFans, what are they called?
I assume just content creator.
Oh, content creator. Thank you. That I won't participate in, just because it crosses a line for me where it's like, I know you and I like you, and I don't know, it would feel weird. And that would be the reason I wouldn't participate in it if I was single. But because I am coupled, I also wouldn't participate in it for that reason. And it's like that crosses a line in relationally. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But they put out she and another person are like in the top 1% of earners on that platform, and they put out two episodes of a podcast called Rate That Dick. And they would take a dick pic that they had and rate it and talk about it. And it was interesting. So they had a very, they had a specific, they had a podcast that would interest a great number of people, probably all dudes, because dudes always want to know there's a certain group of dudes that are like, I want to know what girls really think about dick pics. And so they would talk about it. And then, and it was very focused and tangentially related to the work that they did.
I have to say, this fascinates me for a number of different reasons, and none of them are probably
right. Isn't it? It's very interesting. Yeah, it's like
I could care less about what anybody thinks of a dick pic. That never crosses my mind. But I realize that part of why I could care less is I'm not overly modest to begin with. I don't care who sees me. So why would I care about the appearance of other people?
I don't know. It was interesting.
No, but that's the funny thing, right? Like I'd still find the focus on a very specific subject fascinating, even if I have no interest or concern about that personally. That's probably something that I would listen to an episode or two of just because it's different.
Well, I mean, you'd listen to 100% of their show if you listened to 2 episodes.
Well, it's one of those things that even though I have no interest in general from my general day-to-day perspective, I do have an interest in how other people view things.
Yeah.
And that seems like the kind of thing that would shed a lot of light on how other people interpret a medium or type of medium that I have no interest in.
Yeah, it's like I have once gotten a dick pic, and it was really funny. So I love a good gender role reversal. Like I can remember one of the first times I went and did some off-road driving with some folks, and 2 of the people I was riding with a woman driving her Jeep, and there was another woman following in her Jeep. So it was like 2 Jeeps, 2 women drivers, and I'm a passenger. And the other driver had some issue with her sway bar, and so she was getting up under the Jeep, and I was holding the light. It was awesome. So I love a good gender role reversal. And so one time I received a dick pic. It was back in the before times. I was single, and
did you pause or did I drop?
Yeah, no. I was catching my breath. I received,
and I'm not hearing.
Oh no.
So that's strange because I turned off all focus modes. I know it's not related to the focus mode changing this time, so I don't know what happened.
Did this come into your phone or your computer?
This came on the computer. So
okay.
After a restart, everything seems to be fine.
Do you want to record a show during the day sometime just to see how that fares?
Yeah, I'm leaning toward trying to at least start isolating variables because I don't know of anything at all that changed related to time.
Right.
And we had a pretty long stretch without this happening, and then now it's happening again, and I haven't had any changes to the network either that I'm aware of. I don't know. There's got to be some little thing that I'm just missing. But it does make me think maybe we try recording during the day next time just to see if there's a difference. Because I do wonder if it's not something with maintenance upstream that there's no way I could predict either.
Right.
I don't know. But anyway, we were talking about this random interest in dick pics.
Yeah. So what was most interesting about it? So this, I once read this article, and the article was, what was it? An article? No, somebody on Twitter asked women, "What would you do if men had a 6 p.m. curfew?" And the responses that women put out there were just, they shocked me. Like, it was shocking to see how many women would be like, I'd go out and have so much fun if there was a 6 p.m. if men had a 6 p.m. curfew.
I remember seeing something about this. I don't remember very many specifics, but I do remember there being an overwhelming consensus of a greater feeling of safety.
Yeah. It's like, I'd walk at night. I'd walk around in the, I'd walk my dog in the dark. I would go for a nighttime run. I would go to a club and I would dance with my friends and I would get drinks and I wouldn't worry about anything. It's like, they're like what got to me was like, their responses were, that's how they want to live the life that I live. Like, I go, like, yeah. It just, it hurt me. It hurt me so much to see that.
One of the things that I have really honed in on as a parent is the focus on teaching, since I have a son, on teaching him what it means to respect women. You know, there's no reason we should have dress codes that disproportionately penalize women for wanting to wear something that makes them feel comfortable. Like, it's not on them to cover 90% of their body with fabric because boys have hormones. No, it's just as much on the boy to know that that's not an appropriate course of action.
No, you teach boys to not objectify women.
Right. Much better phrasing than I just couldn't think of it for some reason.
No, I grew up in a house.
It's one of those things that I struggle so much to comprehend because, like, how do so many people view another person as an object? And I know that it's just because I don't view people that way that I struggle to comprehend it. I recognize that that's not a typical viewpoint. But because I don't hold that view, I really struggle to wrap my head around it. And sorry, I've interrupted you twice now. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I grew up in a household where, like, modesty was taught and it was important to not cause men to stumble with your looks. That was the teaching I got growing up. And I remember,
real quick, just so I make sure I understand, we're referring to modesty for females specifically, or modesty across the board? I feel like that's a clarifying distinction that needs to be.
It's mentioned. It's modesty across the board, but heavily influenced on women keeping their parts covered.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I set the appropriate image.
Like, there was, like, there were things that men could do that would be sexually arousing to women, but that was a very small percentage of the cases that modesty was talked about. Most of it was like having, dress lengths that were long enough and not showing cleavage, and not having something that's too tight fitting, but something, there was like this really knife edge that women had to walk because they needed to look like women, but not look like women, And so
this is one of those areas where I like to argue it from its simplest form. If you go to a nudist beach, theoretically, there's no clothing, right? You have men, women, all shapes and sizes. There should not be anything different about interactions there than there are anywhere else where clothes aren't involved. And if you're the type of person to go to a nudist beach to hit on other people and make them feel uncomfortable, that's a problem. That's not normal behavior. And so where you really see this behavior play out well as far as maybe let's back up slightly. Most people think of a nudist beach and they think of supermodels lounging around.
No, man,
an eye feast for guys, right?
It's big old brown man butts is what's out there.
Yeah, very much so. If you go to a proper nudist colony, nudist beach, you're going to see your average everyday person, generally speaking. I mean, depending on where you go, it might be better or worse, etc. But
it's not going to be what you look at to become sexually aroused.
Yes. And the point is, you should be able to go and view other people in that same relaxed, non-aroused context, whether they're wearing clothes or not, to be a proper functioning member of society. And if you can't do that, if you look at a woman who is wearing a short skirt and are aroused and want to grab her, you're really crossing multiple lines. Like, you need to reevaluate how you view people, much less women.
Right. It's not her that has the problem. It's you with the problem. It's the man who wants to behave that way that has a problem. So, but I grew up, it's like, yeah, they would say that, yeah, the man has a problem, but they would say the woman is causing the problem. That's where it's like, you know.
It's such a fucked up argument.
It
Sorry,
is.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I called modesty the Christian version of slut shaming.
It's tough to argue against that. It really is. Because so many different places and teachings talk about not tempting men. It's not about not tempting other people. It's about not tempting men. And that's a really fucked up viewpoint.
Yeah. It's like, stop objectifying them. Like, that's when I came up with that, when I got that, when I started articulating it that way, like, people that I know that subscribe to this belief had a really difficult time disagreeing with me. I was like, it's the man who's objectifying the woman that's wrong. If you believe in God and you believe God created our bodies and they're wonderful and a creation of his, then why are you saying that she's wrong for being nude? Or wrong for wearing something that is form-fitting. Like, it doesn't even have to be like, revealing. It's just like, I remember dudes, like, I never, like, I realize I'm in a minority when I say this, and I think you're probably in the same minority. But it was really in my, later on in my adulthood that I realized how much of a minority that I was in. But like, if I see a very attractive woman and she's wearing quote unquote provocative clothing, I was like, oh, she's sexually arousing, but that doesn't necessarily sexually arouse me. Like, I'm not motivated to do anything. I'm like, oh, I can appreciate that, but that's it. Like, I appreciate in like a form of art, like a form of, because art can be sexually arousing. And that's good, but I don't ever, like, you can, I think people don't understand that there's a line between being sexually aroused by someone or something and objectifying that thing. I think a lot of people blur those two into a place where they don't distinguish the difference.
I agree. I think I would change the phrasing. I think that a lot of people don't recognize the difference between sexual arousal and sexual attack. Do you follow the thought process there first, I suppose? And is that similar to what you're describing, or is that maybe more aggressive than what you're thinking?
It's more aggressive than what I was thinking, because the teaching that I grew up with was sexual arousal in this case is wrong.
Well, and I think that's why I was kind of harping on the more extreme phrasing, because generally speaking, there are plenty of schools of thought who will say feeling aroused is problematic outside of wedlock, right?
Right.
I mean, let's face it, that's the core basic teaching for most religious institutions and educational settings. Like, if you're aroused, you're sinning.
Right. And there's this whole, I saw this meme today. I happened to come across this meme, and it's like, it's not premarital sex if you don't ever get married.
I've seen that one.
But yeah, so it's not. So I'm missing something here. Like I'm not quite. So there can be
other phases. There's a gray area that we don't talk about, right? But the things that catch headlines are you're aroused and then you act on that arousal. What we don't talk about is all of the different convoluted things in between.
So I guess the gray part that I'm talking about is like, you see this woman, she's interesting, she's sexually arousing, but I'm going to put that away because she's a human being and I don't objectify people like this. And I think there's a lot of men that just never put away, I'm sexually aroused by this woman.
Well, and
then it goes
beyond that. Like
and it snowballs into this objectification.
Well, and the reason I went from sexual arousal to sexual attack is because a lot of men don't recognize the difference between I'm aroused by this person for whatever reason. That means she is trying to seduce me, right? That's the link that a lot of people seem to have, which is what leads to unwanted advances. Like, just because you are aroused does not mean that the source of your arousal has any interest in you whatsoever.
Yeah, women look good for themselves, not for you. Honestly, I feel like we should have a woman on this show, like keeping us in check at this point. I'm feeling like.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. Because one of the things I was thinking about is there's also a difference between objectification and wanting to have an isolated experience when you're in a relationship with someone. Like I'm struggling to craft the statement in a way that makes sense, but it's the same difference between if I'm in a relationship with someone and they perform an action that would be objectification if it were not someone I were in a relationship with, it can have a different meaning, right? It's because there's a shared level of understanding and trust and communication outside of that, which makes me want to just stop and say, you know what, not only am I not qualified to talk about this, I don't even actually know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of this. Does that make sense?
I think so. There were some bits of that the audio cut out on my side, so I might have missed something.
It's just a recognition that not only do I not know what it feels like, I don't have any frame of reference for being a recipient of that type of action either.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does make a lot of sense to say, we've mentioned the problem, we've really focused in on that piece, but I don't know that we can take the conversation further without a female viewpoint.
Yeah, I think at least one female viewpoint it would be very beneficial at this point in the conversation.
It gives me some ideas for something I might want to try. I will send them offline, side conversation. See what you think.
Yeah, because I got to a point where I started saying things that women have told me about this topic, So, like, I got past all of what I could draw upon personally, and then started drawing upon like what's been anecdotally told to me. But all we got on this, like, we went way down this rabbit hole because I was talking about this podcast, and one of the reasons that, I mentioned the Twitter question, like what would you do if men had a 6 p.m. curfew, and like ever since then I've sort of if I've seen something where women are talking about something that I know exists but know nothing about, I kind of want to hear what they have to say about it. And it's interesting to me. And it was an interesting 2-episode series, and the production quality was lacking just a little bit, but it wasn't bad. Like it's totally I didn't have a lot of difficulty listening to it, but having done a podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I can see how like I would have, there would have been like, here's some production things I would have changed about this show. But otherwise it was a good 2 episodes, and it was interesting. And if there were more, I probably would have listened to them, because they were 20 minutes. They were only like 20 minutes long, which I think is like how people are like, that's how, like longer than 30 minutes is like, that's a long show. And it's like, I'm like, I don't think I listen to any shows less than 2 hours.
Yeah, I know. We struggle just to keep it under an hour. We have done better recently, but I don't know how much of that is just trying to be more succinct with points versus maybe the topic itself we don't want to belabor and feel like we're beating a dead horse.
Right. Anyway, so it was interesting in that way, and I never finished my story about getting a dick pic. It was when I was single. I was talking to it was using one of the dating apps, and I was talking to somebody. We'd switched to, had matched with somebody on a dating app, switched over to sending text messages, and somebody had sent her a dick pic. So she just thought, in the middle of our conversation, out of nowhere, she'd just forward it to me. So I got to experience what it's like to get a dick pic randomly. And it's super random because, I'm a dude. I did what most women do with dick pics, and then just kind of laugh at it. And I can see what you're trying to do to make it look bigger than it actually is.
So I do think it's funny that historically, when I have gone out with groups of friends, for some reason or another, I have repeatedly been hit on by homosexual males.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's just my demeanor or maybe my appearance, who knows. But for some reason or another, this has been a regular occurrence when I've gone out with small groups of people. And I just laugh at it at this point because I really don't care. But because of that and the methodology used, I at least kind of see where women get uncomfortable when they get hit on and a proxy is used. And it's strange. It's very disjointing. Me being a guy, very confident in general, I just don't care and shrug it off. But if I were not me, I can see how very uncomfortable it would make me. And that has been an interesting experience over the years. Because the first time I remember, I was in high school. This has not been just a random occurrence once or twice. And it does make me more, I think, sympathetic to how creepy guys can be. And
totally.
And I don't want to make it sound like every guy is intentionally creepy. Plenty of them just honestly have no clue how to approach the person that they have some level of interest in. I recognize that is also a problematic skill set.
It comes back to education, right?
The only way we fix that is to call attention to it.
Comes back to education.
I agree, but I don't even think it's that simple. I think it's more just socialization as a whole. I don't think it's even so much education as it is learning how to talk to people.
Well, I don't mean necessarily formal education, but I mean just general. So we have a problem with masculine toxicity. Masculine toxicity. We have a serious problem with masculine toxicity in our society, and this stems from it. Men don't know how to talk to women. Men objectify women. Men don't know how to not be creepy. And pretty recently, there was a scenario, and Becca was outside of that scenario, and I went to her and I said, hey, and I showed her some messages on my phone in a group text, and I said, should I say something to my friend? Because it was one of those things where it's I'm cognizant of not saying something. I'm part of if I see something and I don't say something, I'm part of the problem, or I'm allowing the problem to persist. And so it was one of those things where it's I wasn't exactly sure. It was kind of borderline. And I said, hey, I need you to look at this. Should I be saying something to my male friend to keep him in check? Because that's the thing. Men, it's men need to be taught how to be around women, and if they don't know and they cross a line, other men need to go to that man and tell them, hey, you've crossed the line. Because men are only, for certain things, men are only going to listen to other people that look like you and identify like you.
Well, and it goes a step further than that. The particular type of male persona that we're talking about generally is not going to respond to anyone other than another
man. Yeah, exactly. I remember
it's very similar to, we've had this conversation in the past, but it's very similar to a person of a darker skinned color.
Yes,
is going to say that there's no reason for a white person to talk about something or do something, but that misses the mark a little bit, because we're not wanting to try to understand your plight specifically. We recognize that we can't. There's a different level of perspective and understanding there. But what we can do is assist in translating the message to those people who don't understand, who only listen to other people that look or seem to be similar to them, because that's the area that we absolutely can contribute and can contribute positively. And it's the same thing with, a male objectifying women is not going to listen to a woman, but he will absolutely listen to another male, especially someone he views as an alpha male, saying, hey, that's not right.
Right.
And finding those ways to influence that type of behavior really is the epitome of what it means to try to make the world a better place. However minuscule the interaction, it makes a difference.
It does. It really does. I could only say that. I could only re-say it in different words. But yeah, I go and I listen to people who look and identify differently than me, so that I can talk to people who look and identify the same as me. Yeah. There was another thing I was going to say, but it has fallen out of my head.
Yeah, there were a couple of side tangents that I thought of that I have completely lost now at this point as well. And it's just because that last little bit, that emphasis, that I think is where, when we've discussed things that are focused on that piece, on what you can do actionably to make something about the world around you ever so slightly better, those have been the episodes that have really felt good.
Yeah.
Even if it seems like it's the most minor of actions, every little bit helps.